I remember having my very first boyfriend and him cheating on me and then having to break up with me. And I was like, why do you have to break up with me? I mean, I don't understand that. It didn't make any sense why people had to break up if they had sex with somebody else. And funny enough, that boyfriend actually was, a 10-year lover. So we remained lovers for a very long time, even though we didn't call it that. We didn't know it. I never was that concerned about the fact that he might be in another relationship.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Well, welcome to episode 334. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an interview with Dr. Evelin Dacker. She was previously on our podcast back on our Focus Fridays episode 1.3 back in February 2020. So it's been quite a while.
It's been a few minutes.
Just a few minutes.
Just 4 years. Yeah.
Dr. Dacker is a physician. She's a sex educator, consent educator, speaker, visionary, writer, so many amazing things, and really walks us through her journey exploring relationships for the last few decades.
Yeah, this is a fantastic and just an absolutely beautiful conversation. So a huge thank you to Dr. Dacker for coming on today, for sharing your story, for all of the work you do, of course. And yeah, as Emma said, it's been about 3+ decades of relationshiping, and it's looked a lot of different ways, but it sort of started with as you'll hear, Dr. Dacker feels that she's been non-monogamous pretty much her whole life, took about a 20-year detour into monogamy, then opened up a marriage, and then sort of opened up her whole life to sort of loving and relating in a new way. And it's just, again, a really beautiful journey.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Dacker, for everything that you shared. A quick reminder to everyone listening, you can find links to all of Dr. Dacker's work, including her websites and everything mentioned in this episode in our podcast show notes. You can find links to those show notes in your podcast player or on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com.
And one other quick thing to remind everybody about, a few weeks ago, we interviewed Courtney Brame from Something Positive for Positive People back on episode 326, and he talked a bit about his herpes stigma conference. Well, wouldn't you know it, Dr. Dacker is going to be speaking at the same herpes stigma conference on May 23rd. It is a virtual conference. You can find out more information, again, in the podcast player show notes below or on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Highly, highly recommend you check this out. It's going to be a phenomenal conference. So yeah, Courtney's got an amazing lineup of speakers, and we're super excited for that.
For anyone who's a premium subscriber, we're going to jump right into the interview with Dr. Dacker now. And for anyone else, we do have a few announcements.
The first announcement is a reminder that if you would like to be one of the premium subscribers who gets to skip all of these announcements up front, you can do so by going to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, scrolling all the way down on the homepage towards the bottom. You'll see a whole bunch of information there about how you can join the premium subscription for as little as $4 a month.
Next up, we have our next virtual meet and greet coming up on April 11th. That is next week. We would absolutely love you to come join us. For anyone not familiar with our virtual meet and greets, these are a wonderful opportunity to come meet like-minded people in a low-pressure environment. Our next one, again, as I said, is on April 11th. You can sign up at our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, at the banner at the top of the page. And also, a quick heads up, we do one of these every month. However, we are going to be taking the summer off. So come join us now in April, and then you can come join us later this fall.
Yes, don't miss this one. It's going to be a doozy.
It's going to be awesome.
A fun doozy.
A fun doozy.
A fun doozy. And if just meeting once a month isn't good enough for you, which I feel you there, we would love to have you join our virtual community. This is an amazing space of love and support and kindness and friendship and all of the things. You can find out more on our website. Again, click on the community tab this time. It's a couple bucks a month. You get a monthly Q&A call on Zoom. You get men's groups. You get women's groups. You also get a whole bunch of different channels like pets and food and an NSFW channel and travel, family support, all sorts of ways that you can connect with, again, like-minded people from all over the world. We have almost 300 members, and we would love to have you join us. We're actually really, really close to 300 members.
Yay!
So we'd love to have you help us tip it over and come hang out and join the party. Emma and I in there all day, every day, having a hoot and hollering good time or something like that.
We are, yes. You can sign up for the community on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, on the community tab. And while you're there, go over to the resources tab, check out our favorite way to get tested for STIs. It is stdcheck.com. It is fast and discreet, efficient. I was going to say fast and efficient are kind of similar. But anyway, it's our favorite way to get tested for STIs. It is the service that Finn and I use, and we highly, highly encourage you to use it as well. By using the links on the resources page, you get a discount, making a 10-panel test only $129, and you support the podcast. Thank you in advance. And best of all, you get to know your sexual health status.
And the last reminder, if you would love to reach out to us, or if you want to at all, we would love to have you. How about that?
Yes.
If you would like to, we would love you to. Reach out, send us an email, send us a voicemail. We'd love to have you come on the show. Again, that is an open invitation to anybody out there listening who would love to share their story. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a podcaster. You don't have to be anything other than your amazing self, and show up with a willingness to share your story and help other people feel less alone.
And with that, let's go and talk with Dr. Dacker.
Let's do it. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Dacker. We are super excited to talk to you. The last time we were just reminiscing, the last time we talked to you was October of 2019, and that episode published in early 2020, right in the pandemic was coming along, and we put out our first season of Focus Fridays, and you were there to talk about sexual health and safety, and we're super excited to have you back to dig into your story. So thank you for coming back.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We would love for you to start just by introducing yourself.
Yeah, my name is Evelin Dacker, and I am by training, a family physician in Salem, Oregon. And I also am a sex educator, consent educator, somehow became an STI kind of educator. And I think it's kind of funny, and a bit of a herpes expert. And yeah, so that's pretty much me. I live in Salem, Oregon. I have 2 children, and yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And that was when we got in touch with you you came on and talked all about herpes and stigma and STI testing and all of the stigma around STIs. And, we probably need to do an update on that soon. But for now, we'd love to go back, or we'd love to dig into your relationship, your personal story a little bit. And so maybe if you maybe start by sharing sort of what does your sort of relational ecosystem look like today at the beginning of February 2024?
Ooh, it's very interesting because I am actually single and in a really deep relationship with my creativity right now. And that is where my focus has been for the last year. I have been in a relationship or multiple relationships for a total of almost 32 years. And last year I chose to pivot away and kind of really focus inward and take a little time to do a lot of trauma healing. And now I am in the middle of writing a book and finishing a book. And so that's where so I'm in a relationship with this beautiful muse of creativity right now.
I love it. That's amazing. And
yeah, that's amazing.
From everybody we've talked to, writing a book is a full-time relationship, or maybe multiple consecutive ones. You got the one with your editor, the one with the publisher. You got them all,
the one
right?
With yourself.
Yeah. Your computer. So yeah, well, so maybe then going back in time a bit to sort of, I don't know, the beginning, and maybe
Yeah.
where and if non-monogamy sort of wove into your story for the first time.
You know, it's funny because back in 2014, I went to this class on relationship structures, like different relationship structures. And I went then with my then current husband. And when she talked about like polyamory and all the different non-monogamy, I turned to him and I'm like, oh my God, I am polyamorous. It was like all of a sudden a light bulb went on and I understood myself and my entire life and everything that the way I wanted relationships to be. And it made sense to me. That being said, I went through a 20-year detour into monogamy. So
I like the way you frame that.
So was that the first time you had the language for it? Like it was like a knowing, but you didn't know it was a thing?
Yes. Which is amazing. And my husband at the time, had the same light bulb moment when he realized ADHD. He was like, oh my God, this explains so much. Thank you. And so when I got it and I was like, oh my God, this explains so much. Instead of getting him to be like, oh, I get it. Yay. It kind of freaked him out.
I was going to say, I could imagine sitting at a conference or at a presentation and your partner turns to you and be like, oh, by the way, that's me, to be like, oh shit, what are we going to do with this?
Yeah. Well, the end of the story is pretty obvious, right? There was a detour. But it's interesting. I think like in some ways, when people think about how they're wired, I taught myself compersion when I was 15 years old. I taught myself that way of feeling. Like if I had a crush on a boy and he ended up dating another girl, I was just like, I put myself into being happy for him that he had someone. And if I really loved him, as a 15-year-old would love somebody, then I should be happy for him, right? Even if it's not me. And like when my girlfriends, my best friends, when you're a teenage girl, you have all these girlfriends. And then when they started having boyfriends and spending their time with a boyfriend, I kind of did the same thing. I was just like, okay, I'm going to be happy for them. So compersion just makes sense to me. It's the way that I navigate, that open love feeling. In my 20s, I remember having my very first boyfriend and him cheating on me and then having to break up with me. And I was like, why do you have to break up with me? I mean, I don't understand that. It didn't make any sense why people had to break up if they had sex with somebody else. And funny enough, that boyfriend actually was, a 10-year lover. So we remained lovers for a very long time, even though we didn't call it that. We didn't know it. I never was that concerned about the fact that, he might be in another relationship. And then I had, a lot of my relationships, I had long distance relationships, and I never felt this need to define them. I just felt like, oh, if we're together, then we love each other and let's treat each other with that love. And I was again in medical school. I was a student. I traveled a lot. So it just made sense to me in my life. Oh, this is who I am. Looking back, like I remember reading, Henry Miller and watching the movie Henry and June. I remember, there was a BBC series called Portrait of a Marriage about, I'm forgetting their names right now. Violet Sackman. I'm forgetting her name. It was like an artist and a writer, and how they had this open relationship where she had relationships with women and he had relationships with men, and always being like, that's what I want when I grow up. Like, I want that. I want to be able to have lovers, female lovers, male lovers. Like, I'm going to have this great open relationship. And then I met my ex-husband on a beach in Thailand. And, as one does when you're 28, 27 years old, you meet somebody on a beach in Thailand and 4 days later you decide you're going to marry them and live together happily ever after. So
a story for the ages.
Right. So there became the detour. And even though, we were both pretty alternative. And he at the time was living in Australia. And I was in the midst of like, not sure where I was going to live because I was completing medical school and I was going to go to my residency, but he was going to follow me anywhere because, that's what you do when you're 27 and you meet somebody on a beach in Thailand.
And you fall in love immediately.
Exactly. And it never, that relationship never, like that structure just never came to fruition. Which was really, I'm really not quite sure why. There were moments. I remember this dinner party we went to one time, and there was this beautiful Australian woman and her French husband and her French boyfriend, and we were all flirting together. And I just felt like there was this energy. And I remember being like, I want to follow this. And my, my ex-husband being like closed off to it. So I've always been like, damn, if we followed that, like what could have our marriage been like?
Yeah.
Or, he had a short relationship with somebody before he moved here when he was still in Australia. And I was like, damn, if you told me about that, even though I asked you because I knew something was going on, if you told me about that, we could have had something different happen.
Yeah.
But instead, we had a very traditional monogamous relationship for 20 years.
Yeah.
Up until I was in my mid-40s and I joined a roller derby team. They say roller derby saves your soul,
Yeah.
right? It saved my soul. It kind of like it blew up my life, but it's so funny because I remember going on a hike with my ex-husband then and being like, you know what? I'm going to join a roller derby team. And he looked at me and he's like, I don't think so. I think it's just below you. You're a doctor in this community. You shouldn't, it's just too crass for you. And I said to him, it was written up in the New York Times, so it has to be okay.
Argue with that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, no, it's not crass. It was in the New York Times. It's totally cool.
Yeah. It's totally mainstream. It's all good.
Yeah. And so I joined this roller derby team, and it was like the first time I was with this like group of women, and we were allowed to be sexy, and we could wear, boy shorts and fishnets, and we could take on a different identity and have an avatar and go in roller skates in circles. It was like it was the only problem with this, you had to play roller derby, which
I'm just here for the outfits and the skating.
Yeah, it was great, except like you had to play a game, and I wasn't really that competitive, or I'm not a really good roller derby player. But what happened is I became kind of the team doctor. And as a team doctor, that people started asking me about sex stuff, sexuality. And, we were in this like yummy, juicy container where sex was just like bubbling. That energy was in that container. And I was like, I went to my husband. I'm like, hey, I've been heterosexual, monogamous for all these years. Before we got married, I identified as bisexual. I had relationships with people who identified as women. So I was like, hey, I really want to explore this part of me. And he tacitly gave me his consent, but it was very problematic. I was like, sure, you could sleep with a woman, but you cannot be friends with her. I don't know if you know people who are polyamorous, but like, just having sex isn't really our thing.
Yeah.
There has to be some heart involved, even like friendship. And so as soon as he saw me getting close to someone, he would retract that consent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, so I spent a number of years feeling very frustrated, like, oh God, I'm like dying sexually. I was in my mid-40s. I'm a physician. I deal with a lot of people going through menopause, and just seeing all these group of people losing their sexuality. And there came a point where I felt like, okay, I either embrace that I'm going to lose my sexuality and it'll put me out of my misery, and I'll stay with my in this monogamous relationship, or I have to make a shift in my relationship for my sexuality.
Yeah.
And I made that decision to make that shift in my relationship and go and find my sexuality again. And to be honest, like, I never was that sexual of a human, because in my I was brought up, let me just go back a little bit. I'm Mexican American, and I was brought up with a very sexually strict Mexican mother. And so I was brought up being scared of penises, being thought that I have to wait till I'm married to have sex. And if I have sex before marriage, and I can't wear white. My father was very liberal and was very supportive of me, but my mother was very, strict. So I'd always kind of had this repressed sexuality. So in my mid-40s, choosing to follow my sexuality was a really big and scary thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was also in the midst of really studying sexuality and realizing that there's something missing in the way that we do medicine. There's something in the way that we treat people. Like, here I am. I've been practicing holistic integrative medicine for 25 years. And realizing, darn, we're not talking about pleasure here. We're not talking about the thing that connects us with other people. We're so scared of sexuality that we avoid it altogether. So as I was in roller derby, and they were asking me all these questions about sexuality, and I was finishing up a certification in functional medicine, and I was starting to have my own budding sexuality come to blossom, it all kind of came into this one beautiful package that just, exploded me, and not exploded me into pieces of a mess, but exploded me into this beautiful firework.
I love that image. Yeah.
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 I would love, Dr. Dacker, before we unwrap the package and let the firework explode, I'd love to go back and just talk about a few of the things that you've shared, because there's so much amazing stuff in there. And the first one was around compersion and how you taught yourself compersion.
Yeah.
And so as a teenager, exactly. And so first, for anybody who's not familiar with the word compersion at this point, it's sort of, loosely speaking, you sort of find pleasure in other people's pleasure, right? Rather than feeling like, well, Emma's really enjoying herself. That makes me feel yucky because I wish she was enjoying it with me. Just saying, her happiness makes me happy. And again, not a perfect definition. I would recommend people go to a website of a friend of ours, whatiscompersion.com. That's Marie Twain's website, and all of her work and research on compersion is amazing. So I just wanted to throw that out there because it's a really great resource for anybody who's not familiar. But for you, just teaching yourself compersion at that age, and it sounds like it really stuck in your brain that you went through this process. And I'm curious kind of how you did that. And did it feel natural, or did you have those tinges of this boy I like some other girl, that doesn't, and then you had to do really hard work, or did it come a little natural to you?
I can't 100% answer that, because that was, 35 years ago.
Sure.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. I understand.
But what I remember, I had a crush on this boy, a really intense crush on him. And I remember, and of course it was a silent crush. He didn't know me. He knew me, but it was a crush from afar. And when he connected with this other girl, I just remember being look, Evelin, if you really have this love for him, you got to be happy for him. And look how good she is for him. She's way better for him than you are for him. And that's okay. I could still have this feeling that I love him.
Yeah.
And then going through it with my close group of girlfriends, as they started getting boyfriends and I didn't have a boyfriend. And just seeing, having that loss of oh, they're not hanging out with me. They're not going to roller skating with me on Friday night anymore. They're going with Billy. I just kind of like dealt with the sadness and dealt with that loss and dealt with the jealousy. It's not like I didn't have the jealousy and I didn't experience the loss. I absolutely did.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to put in those, in those other feelings of like, oh, if you really love them, it's okay. It's okay. You want what's best for them if you really love them.
Yeah.
And it just, like, again, this was way before the idea of compersion was around.
Sure.
I didn't necessarily ever talk to anybody about this. It just like, I was a feeling that I understood. And when I first got described with compersion, it's like, oh, of course. Yeah.
That makes a
It
lot of
doesn't mean
sense.
I don't feel jealousy. You
Yes.
know?
And that's a really important point. Like, it doesn't mean that you don't feel jealousy. That can still,
Right.
you can feel both.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I'm human, right? I get jealous. There's a lot of things there's a lot of reasons we get jealous from people. We have egos. If we have egos, we're going to get jealous. But I just think that like my heart is big enough to hold it all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I
just want to say one other thing about love. And like one of the things, one time, I met this woman and she was telling me about being a mother. And she said, the thing about being a parent is it's the kind of love that the deeper it gets, the more you have to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that also really resonated with me. It's different from romantic love when you're trying to get closer, right? But as a parent, you have to let your child go. You start with them actually being connected to you for me at least. And then, you slowly let them go as a mother. And so I also feel like my loverships are similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that I could love and keep love for people regardless of where they're at in my life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds almost exactly like what you did through school and through medical school, where you sort of had this cast of people that you had relationships with, but they were sort of fluid. And you said it like it really fit into your life. And I think that's really important for people to sometimes step back and go, well, could my life really support a deep, romantic, integrated partnership right now while I'm doing all of this crazy work and all of this crazy school? Or is it better to have like 3 or 4 people who can kind of float in when they're free and when I'm free, and it's okay, but I still care about them. Maybe I even still love them, but we don't have this like tight grasp on it to the point where we're like stifling or suffocating each other, or you're like feeling angsty because, I guess I can't do my homework tonight because I need to call so-and-so, or I need to go out because we have a certain amount of time we have to spend to meet some type of invisible quota. And so it sounds like you really took that into your life moving forward for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, again, it wasn't like I planned it out. It
Right.
just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And, it's so funny. I had this one boyfriend in medical school who was from Denmark. And so he was in Denmark and we spent a lot, he would come visit, and he ended up getting married to someone. And I remember my heartbreak was not about him getting married, but was the fact that our lovership has to end. And I was like, do we really have to end our lovership? Like, can't we just meet each other like once every couple of years in Paris or somewhere and just like have that? And unfortunately for his then wife was not okay with that. So, but you know what? We're still really good friends.
Yeah. That's beautiful that you that you found what made that shift.
Yeah.
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 Right. And you never know what happens in 10 years, right? You never know where it could go if you can keep the friendship there and the conversation. Not that you have to like bring it up every year and be like, hey, are you ready yet? But just
can we become lovers again? No, I don't want to be lovers anymore with him.
Fair enough. So then you unwrap this package. You kind of go through roller derby, or you're in roller derby.
Are you moving ahead to her 40s?
Yeah, I'm moving ahead to it's time to let the firework, light the firework and let it explode. And I'm curious what did that coincide with this speech or the talk on polyamory, or was this pre-polyamory conference?
Workshop.
Workshop.
I think it was kind of during.
Okay.
So what happened was that I started losing my sexuality. Like, as I said, it was like my spouse and I had a challenging relationship, and I started losing my sexuality. And so somewhere along the line, I read Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. And she talked about like the invisible third and how some people are swingers and all this stuff. And I thought this was the perfect idea. This is it. I try to open my marriage. I try to have, female lovers. And every time it got close, my spouse closed it down. And finally I was like, hey, you know what? I don't want to have sex anymore. But look, I read this book and you should read the book too. And let's like open our marriage. And he's like, okay, I'll think about it. And I was doing, some coursework that took me away for weekends at a time. And I was gone one weekend and there was this man who I became friends with. And I was like, I'm going to see if this could go somewhere. And, I propositioned him. He said no to me, but that was okay. Cause I'm okay with people saying no. And I got back home and I'm like, okay, I told my husband, I'm like, okay, we're going to open our marriage. And how are you about it? He's like, oh, I'm totally cool. I'm fine. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, did you read the book? And he's like, oh, I listened to the podcast. I listened to her TED Talk. So he based his opening of our marriage on her TED Talk.
On Esther Perel's TED Talk.
On Esther Perel's TED Talk. He never read the book. And I just delved into non-monogamy. I started playing with some good girlfriends of mine that were already there. I kind of roped him into it. We had some fun times with him and friends of mine. We pretty much stuck to friends. And it was all good until I fell in love with someone.
Well, it sounds like he had a major shift somewhere in there. Like, I want to get to the love falling, but I'm just curious. It sounds like he watched a TED Talk and was like, something shifted.
Okay, I can do this, or at least I can attempt this.
You know what? I think it just had to do with timing and where our relationship was at and how dysfunctional our sex life was at and how unhappy I was.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that he had to let me become a little bit more free with my sexuality, or it was gone. Like, I pretty much couldn't have orgasms, didn't like to be touched. It just like, I was so shut down that I couldn't think of anything to do, as I was so shut down as I was studying sexuality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was in alignment with me studying about sexuality, and I was shut down. And as I knew my body was telling me something, I knew my body was telling me something about my relationship, but I had been married for 20 years and I wasn't about to, it was like, at that point, I still felt like I was going to be married forever. And there was no possibility at that point of even considering divorce.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
It was like, we are married till death do us part, because I made this commitment. Both him and I were raised Catholic. So, even though we weren't Catholic, we were raised Catholic. So we had that baggage with us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just belief that like once you're married, it's for life.
Well,
right.
And I feel like too, you hit the 20-year mark. You're like, well, we've come this far. We might as well another 20. Why not? Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to be married my whole life.
yeah.
Yeah.
I could say that even now. Like, I wish I could have been married my whole life. I don't think it could have been possible with that person, but in a different lifestyle, maybe if we started, I mean, I really think like if we had been non-monogamous from the get-go, our marriage could have possibly been more successful.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever success means. It was successful. We have two beautiful children. There's a lot of things that were successful in it, but that detour into non-monogamy was really hard on me.
Yeah.
The detour into monogamy.
Right.
Yeah.
The detour into monogamy was really hard for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So we opened and it was all fun and good for about 9 months.
And just lots of exploring with different people and it sounds like with your husband at the time too.
With my husband at the time.
Yeah.
So it made it safe for him.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounded you a theme kind of showed up a few times in there that I thought was interesting. Um, you talked about it with the Australian French couple where you were like, I kind of wanted to follow that. And then you had some other ones where you're like, I just wanted to like, I met a person and I wanted to see what was possible. It seemed like there's just a lot of like curiosity. It's not like you want to force it. Like, I don't need to take this and make it something, but like, what could it be if I just let it grow naturally?
Yeah. And that's kind of what happened when I met somebody.
Yeah.
And
So this was at the
I met-
9-month-ish mark.
9-month mark. Yes. So I met somebody on the very classy website, Ashley Madison.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I was just looking for like a young hot boy that I could sext with, because things with my spouse were not going well at this point. One little caveat is that he was an alcoholic and he wasn't drinking for a number of months, and then it started coming back and it started getting really heavy again. So right at that point where it was heavy, I met somebody who happened to work in the drug and alcohol field. So this person worked in that field, and this person had a really severe medical condition that caused a lot of pelvic pain for them. Mm. And I was in a place of like being with an alcoholic spouse and losing my desire for my spouse. And again, like not knowing anything about what I wanted, kind of in a bad. So I met this person and we did this unbelievable healing work together. Like, I would say my Kundalini awakening happened. The moment he put his fingers inside of me, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know those places existed within me. It opened up channels in my life that have never closed since. I mean, it just allowed me to be so connected, and it healed him too. Like both of us did this really intense healing with one another. And because of the intensity of this relationship, it kind of forced my husband to quit drinking. So he has been alcohol free for now many, many years. Not many. I mean, since 2014, almost 10 years. Yeah. Good for him. So, and I have to say, I saw this person for maybe 2 to 3 hours once a month for 10 months. That was it. So it wasn't like a relationship that was ongoing and intense, and it was very compartmentalized. And it was so intense though that my husband couldn't handle it. He didn't have any compersion. He couldn't make any space. I was always like, look, aren't you happy? Like, I'm alive again. I'm sexually alive. I could bring this to you. But instead he just felt he was so hurt that he didn't give it to me, that I didn't make him alive, so it became very toxic in my marriage. My marriage ended because of this toxicity that was created, from my opening with another person.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it was so important for him. And I think this is so common, right? That we should be the ones to unlock that in our partners.
Yeah.
That if I were more capable, I could do that. Or if I were better, or how, like it's a shot, right?
Yeah.
To say, I've been married to you for 20 years and I've never been able to unlock that in you, or that's a really hard place.
Yeah. I remember one time we were at a party and this was towards the end of our marriage, and I had somebody flogging me. And again, flogging was kind of new to me, and it was so orgasmic. I'm very much like, I'm very energetically orgasmic. So I don't need to have like stimulation to be orgasmic. And I was like moaning and just so into it. And afterward, my husband was like, that was the most beautiful and heartbreaking experience, because I've never heard you.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, 22 years with someone and them never really hearing your bliss and your deep pleasure was painful. And we ended up, getting divorced and separated. And 2 weeks after I left my marriage, I entered into this beautiful polyamorous relationship with another man. And it was one of the most liberating relationships that I've had. He was a bisexual man, and we were together for 6 years, had a couple of breakups in there, but we're together for 6 years, and really decided from the first time we were together to practice relationship anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went from this marriage of 22 years right into a polyamorous relationship anarchy structure with a bisexual man.
Yeah, it's quite a shift. And coming out of the marriage that you were in, it was a long relationship. There was obviously, sounds like a lot there, clearly. And at the end of the day, it wasn't working. And so you're working through digesting that and grieving that. And then you jump into this new dynamic, which sounds like I would love to hear you talk about it more of that it was more aligned for you with who you are. However, you're still that shift is it's a lot.
And I'm curious, Dr. Dacker, did you also simultaneously end the partnership with the person you were seeing every couple of weeks?
Once a month. Yes, it ended after 10 months because my spouse couldn't hold space for it. I would come back and it would be a horrible
experience.
It would be a horrible experience. Horrible. And, bordering on abusiveness. So I had to end it after 10 months. And
so you're grieving the loss.
That was very hard.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's impossible, right? You're grieving the loss of this awakening relationship, this relationship that you came alive in, and your 22-year marriage or 20-year marriage. That's a hell of a lot to pile on.
Mm-hmm. 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 It was a rough couple of years.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Yeah. And I guess as you entered into this new relationship, how did that work for you? How did you feel in that, that transition and that new type of dynamic?
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was so different from my marriage because, my husband was very kind of almost anxiously attached, right? And totally loved me and totally loved my body. And was but yet there was this nasty undercurrent to it. And then I was with somebody else who was hey, I'm polyamorous. I'm solo poly. Let's do relationship anarchy. Yeah, I kind of have I don't know how I feel about you. I don't know emotionally how I'm connected, but hey, let's have fun and hang out. So it was oh, good. I don't have to give somebody a lot of my emotional energy, and I could explore. I could go try, I could go and try kink stuff without having somebody freak out. I could be with other partners. I could have all this latitude, and yet I have somebody I could play with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, it was lovely. It was lovely. I felt very held in my sexuality. It has been honestly the only relationship I've had. The relationship lasted 6 years where the sex was good all the time. It was always amazing. Even the last time we had sex, it was amazing. Even if it's the most boring vanilla sex I had, it was always so. It made me realize that you didn't have to lose your sexuality even in a long-term relationship. It could always be really yummy and good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Him being bisexual also opened up so many doors. There was times when we had a relationship with another man. We were a throuple. There was ability. He had another relationship with a male. But I never was partnered with that man. But, there was all this compersion, and I had other relationships sometimes with women. It was very open and liberating and freeing. And it worked for a number of years until stop working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I would just to call back doesn't mean it wasn't a success, right? Like this sounds like it was a smashing success of a relationship,
Yes.
but it just didn't last,
Yes.
quote unquote, forever.
Well, just like you had shared, your marriage was,
Success.
yeah, like there's successful things from that relationship too. Like that, just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it's a failure.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think in fact, I know that I couldn't be doing the work I'm doing now and have been and delve into what I could give the world if I stayed married. It was a really hard decision. It's like, do I stay married and lose my sexuality and just be like his wife and we have grandchildren together and we live happily ever after? Or do I go into door number B, where I have no idea what's going to be behind that door? And I decided to step into the mystery, and really, because I was with this other partner who not allowed me, like he didn't judge me for being the executive director of Sex Positive Portland. He supported that, didn't have a problem with the work I do in consent or sex education. Whereas my ex-husband really was like very uncomfortable with all of that. So it allowed me to grow as a human and really understand so many of the nuances of relationships, of different relationships, of love, of communication, of expectation. I mean, all of this informs the work that I do today.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that, I think, is the sort of the tenets around relationship anarchy. And I think people hear that phrase and they're like, it's anarchy, it's chaos. But to me, it's actually very organized in a lot of ways. There's incredible amounts of communication. There's incredible amounts of agreements and ways that people do dance together that create space in a different way. It's sort of how I kind of envision it.
Yeah. And, there's a part of me that still to this day loves some of the tenets of relationship anarchy. And it's how I want to kind of form a relationship. But I've also changed. Like what I want now is it's interesting. It's really different. Having 6 years of this beautiful, nest of exploration, gave me so much. And now I'm kind of ready to shift into something a little bit more partnered again.
Yeah. The phrase that comes to mind, and we've heard this, I think, a lot of times over the years talking to people, it's a much more informed decision, right? Like you almost have this time of exploring and being like, does this work? What is that? What is this? What is this? What is this? And then you come around and you're like, I kind of want this now. But it's a little bit more of an informed decision. You've gotten a little bit of that, I don't want to say out of your system, because some people probably never get it out of their system. They're like, that's just what I want forever. But you came sort of around to, I want something a little bit different.
Absolutely. And I find it so interesting because I'm so grateful that I got to do all of this sexual exploration in my late 40s and 50s. Not in my teens and 20s, where I didn't have the understanding of like, this is my body and this is my choices. But being, having this all happen around my perimenopause and menopause phase was absolutely liberating. And I could say without a doubt, like at 58, I am way more sexual and yummy and vital as a person than I ever was before I was 45.
Yeah.
So when I hear men saying like, oh, older women don't have it, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I could probably like exhaust you, like you have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's just such a different phase of life. I mean, people who go through that experience in their teens and 20s, like it's to have that in your 40s and 50s, like it's beautiful.
The life experience.
It's just you're in a totally different world.
Yeah. So it's not too late.
So, I'm putting it out there. Women who think that they're going to lose their sexuality as they get older and they're going to get like, they're not going to be desired and wanted. That's just a story to keep us small. And I really we can be as yummy as we want for our entire lives. I have one of my patients who's 80 with his 76-year-old, partner. They have sex 4 times a week. Okay. So it doesn't mean it ends at any specific time.
Yep. I will.
Agreed.
This is a great time to plug some of our perennial favorite guests on our show that people talk about all the time, Pam and Jim. I happen to know it off the top of my head, episode 232, because they promote it all the time. He's now 85. She's in her early 70s, and they have sex every single morning. Every single morning, that's
Beautiful.
how they wake up and connect with each other, and that's how they go into their day. And it's amazing. They also go to a hell of a lot of orgies, more orgies than anybody I have ever met in my life. So it is incredible. So it's not too late. I love that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm hoping
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
For sure. For sure.
And I love that you say that, because you said, well, I'm looking for something maybe a little more partnered, but also it sounds like not wanting to give up exploring at the same time, that both can exist.
Absolutely. And that's what's so difficult about finding somebody right now. First of all, I'm not looking because I'm in the process of writing a book.
It sounds like you've chosen yourself right now.
Yeah. But it's really challenging because I don't want somebody who's solo poly or really in poly and they have all these partners or they already have a primary, because I want to be a primary. And I want something, I guess, a little bit more on the monogamish, but I don't want prescriptive monogamy. I don't want to be told what to do, and I don't want to tell somebody what to do. I want there to be room for exploration and play and joy and the unknown. That being said, it's okay to be in a hierarchical polyamorous relationship. I think that's totally fine. I think we sometimes poo-poo it, especially people who are relationship anarchists. It's like, oh, that's bad. Or the other people. I think that's bullshit. Honestly, I think that
it's about how you communicate.
Hierarchical polyamorous, because it's really we only have a certain amount of time on our hands, right? So our love may be unlimited, but our time is not. And yeah, so it's, what I'm calling in is an evolutionary love relationship. That's what I'm calling it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hear
love that term, by the way.
I do. I love that. And I kind of hear that same thread of, I want to be able to follow things that come along, but that maybe you can communicate, hey, I want to follow this with you, person, but I'm also in a primary partnership. And so the way that I can follow this with you will look like this. Do you want in or do you not want in? And then everybody gets to decide if that's a thing they want to be a part of consensually.
Right. Absolutely. And knowing that you could fall in love with people without ever having to touch them.
Yeah.
I had the most beautiful 6-hour love affair last year. This is probably the person I fell the most in love with last year. I was on a plane on my ride to Berlin, and I was sitting next to this police officer, and we just absolutely fell in love with each other. As soon as we landed, went through customs, we gave each other big hugs, wished each other well, and said goodbye. I only know his first name and he only knows my first name. And yet that encounter was so beautiful and was so rich and was so full of love that I counted as yeah, that was a little love affair I had.
I love it.
I love it. And on a plane, what a beautiful moment of and we're here to
yeah, we're sitting here. We might as well make something up.
I know, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's gorgeous.
Reminds me of a song that's 30-second love affair. It's this guy singing about getting at a red light, and he looks over and he sees somebody and he falls in love, and he's runs away in his head, and then the light turns green and they never see each other again. And he's like, ah. So yeah. I love it. I love that.
Yeah. So love is big, and it's so complex, and it's always a gift. Even the hard parts are gifts, all of my relationships, all of my loverships, all of every single one of my relationship ended about a year ago. And it ended in such a way that I realized that it was just a gift. It was a gift to be now taking time to myself and, doing my own work so that when I enter a relationship, I'm not entering it with someone to heal different parts of myself, but that I'm already know how to heal them and I'm healed within myself so I can meet somebody for who they are and have this, like what I said, an evolutionary love relationship that's based on our desire to make the world a better place through our love for ourselves and love for the world and each other. And, I consider myself a sacred activist, and I want to find another sacred activist to make this world a little better place.
Yeah.
I love that.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm also curious, kind of how in navigating these relationships, how has it gone navigating them with like friendships and family members as you've figured out your different relationship structures? In terms of being open and honest and like, it's complicated. It can be very complicated. So I'm curious how that's been for you.
The hardest place for me to be open has been at work, but I'm doing this podcast, so you could tell that I'm already pretty open. It started slowly with my divorce. My friends, of course, all knew what was going on. A lot of my friends knew because they were part of it, and other friends just knew because they were alongside of it. Of course, that I've lost some friendships through it, but that is to be expected, and the ones that stayed. My children, who are now 24 and 26, I was always really open with them about it. As soon as I got involved with that one partner after I left my marriage, I was like, hey, I'm polyamorous. My 26-year-old son and his partner live in the same place as me. And so they've seen have multiple partners come in and out. And I asked my son one time, he was probably around 24, 25 at the time. And I'm like, how does that feel for you, seeing your mother have all these lovers of multiple ages? Some of them were kind of young. And he's like, Mom, I almost feel like I should feel weird about it, but I really don't. I think it's totally fine. So my kids are they're like the coolest humans. They're amazing. They are just, I have the best kids. And so running Sex Positive Portland, of course I was out. I mean, people know me as polyamorous, but at work, I kind of, even though I said I did this work and everybody knows, my stars work, my sexual consent, I kind of kept it on the down low.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of kept it on the down low. Like everybody knew about my primary relationship, but I didn't really talk about all my other lovers until maybe a couple of years ago. And I was like, I can't keep this disparity. My work is getting more known. The more that I claim as myself, the less people could use against me. Yes, I've lost some patients, especially my conservative Christian patients, which is too bad because I love them no matter what. I don't bring sexuality into my work unless it's needed. Mm-hmm. I don't go and say to everybody, hey, how's your sex life? But, in certain ways, I do ask about pleasure. I ask about how they're enjoying their bodies, how they're enjoying their relationships. I share my STARS communication model with them. But it's not like anybody needs to be anything but themselves. But I'm out at work. People know I'm polyamorous. I told my mother before she died, which was extremely hard for her to hear. And she was not supportive of this, of course, and had a really, really hard time supporting my work until probably the week before she died. She finally gave me her blessing on the work that I'm putting into the world. And, so in a way, I'm kind of one of these maybe I are the fault of TMI versus keeping things to myself. But I feel I have to, because I can't stand up as a leader in this work, and I can't stand up as a person who wants to be a role model for other people to be themselves. Like, it's really important that I could be as an example of people being able to be authentic and who they are and loving themselves for who they are in all their messiness. I can't do that unless I do it for myself first. Right. So, yeah, so I'm out there. I have no problem sharing my story here on your podcast because of that. And just hope that it, allows other people to find who they are, because those 20 years that I was monogamous, whereas they worked for me in the times because I was a mother and starting a career and raising a family and all of the things, also didn't work for me. I also wasn't my authentic self. And it caused me to die in many ways. It caused me to be so much smaller. And I've had to work so hard to regain that. Years of counseling and therapy and trauma work to regain what I wasn't. But now I'm here and now I am who I am. And I love myself for all of the complexity and all of the messiness. And yeah.
I love it.
I hope that answered your
It does.
No,
It's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it is complicated, and getting to this place of where you're at now is beautiful.
Yeah.
And honoring that the journey is the journey, and it's not always easy. But it's your journey and your path, and I love what you've shared. Thank you.
Yeah. I just, the thought that came to mind when you shared that, of just sort of like the work is a weird word, but the work and the intention to get here, it almost like you land in a place where you're not just you, you're like emphatically you. You're like, I'm me, and in a way that I've never been, and maybe never would have been if I didn't have to fight a little bit for it.
Absolutely. Which is, we haven't really talked a lot about what my gift to the world is. And it's this communication model that really is kind of like comprehensive sex education that you need to know, like all the things you need to know about yourself in order to communicate them to a partner or a potential partner. And I wouldn't have been able to have that or create that without all the things that I went through, without understanding. Like, we don't just come to each other and be like, okay, this is my STI results and this is what I need. And let's go have sex now. Like, there's so much more to have to, disclose to people that make it richer. And if I didn't have to struggle as much as I did to claim who I was, I wouldn't understand these concepts. And now, it's called the Stars Talk. The Stars Talk has changed because of what I've learned. Before, the first thing was always STIs and sexual health. Now that's the last thing to talk about. And the first thing to talk about is safety and what you need to be safe and what does safe feel like to you. Because there was so much of the time, like, I didn't know that. And I honestly never felt safe in my marriage. Mm-hmm. I never knew what safety was. I didn't feel safe. And so therefore I couldn't bring my full self to the table, and I couldn't bring my sexuality to the table. And so, like, if I could teach anybody anything through my journey and through my work, is to really, like, consider the importance of these concepts, consider the importance of, like, what does safe mean to you? Because you're not going to be able to have good sex, and you're not going to be able to have really intimate, yummy relationships with other people if you can't feel safe. Mm-hmm. So, that's like the first S of my Stars Talk, and all of it, like my turn-ons, which is all about pleasure. Like, I lost my pleasure. I didn't know what sexuality was. I was willing to sacrifice it to stay in a marriage where I didn't feel safe. But something else taught me, like, oh no, pleasure is important. And then I was able to bring that to my medical practice and realize, like, hey, we don't have to suffer if we could also focus on, like, there's so much joys in our lives. It's not just sexual.
Yeah.
The A is about boundaries and understanding boundaries and our trauma and being able to, like, not just say, this is where I'm at and this is where you need to, you can't cross this line, but, like, how do our boundaries become flexible, and how do they adjust to what we need at the moment? Because we're so connected to our safety needs, and we're so connected to what we want as pleasure. So all of it, and even, like, I'm at this point of writing my relationship intentions and expectations chapter, and it's really interesting to write it from the perspective of not being in a relationship and not being in with somebody, right? So to really think about like, what are my intentions? What does sex really mean to me after all these years of, exploring all these different relationships and all this different yummy, amazing sex that I've had, in all these different ways. What does sex mean to me now? And like, what is it that I really want? And what does it mean to me to have something with somebody? And how can I actually be authentic in that and co-create it with someone else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, so much, I don't think I would have been able to actually teach this and write it and help people with their own process without having gone through everything I've gone through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm so beautiful segue, by the way.
Yes.
You made that incredible for us as the host. Like that was beautiful. So thank you. And I love to hear too that you've, not that I felt like there was anything wrong with the model the last time we spoke, but that it is flexible, it's adaptable, that as we grow, maybe we take on different meanings for these things, right? And even like the word safety, right? What I think of when I say safety, or you think of and Emma thinks of, they might all be very different. And then we get to have like a really cool conversation. You could set up the time like, hey partner, I want to talk to you for tonight all about safety. And we're just going to spend hours talking about that. Like what a connective way to spend time together, talking about intimacy and safety in your partnership. Like, I don't know, that gets me excited.
Yeah. And the thing about the STARS framework is that it could mean so much to everybody, right? Like they could be very simple. Like the concepts could be super simple. Like to feel safe, I need to know that you could hear my no, and that you will wear a condom, and that we will be together in locations that our families know where we are, right? Or that I don't want you to drink alcohol. Like it could be that safe, or it could be something like, oh, I notice in my body that when I feel safe, my shoulders are down. I notice a relaxation in my arms, and sitting here with you, I could feel this comfort. So let's maintain this place of like, oh, my body somatically has this feeling, or sometimes, I want to feel a little unsafe. I like that edge of unsafety, but I'm making that choice to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not just doing it unconsciously now and putting myself in a place of danger, which then I'm going to feel like somebody, did a boundary violation and I did something that was iffy in its consent. So, each of these little letters could mean something very simple or something very rich.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you're modeling that it can grow and change over time as you live life and learn new things, and that we can all adapt that too, based on our own lives and what we're learning and growing and changing with.
Yeah. I'm so grateful, Dr. Dacker, that you came back, that we got to hear your story. It was absolutely beautiful. And just thank you for your vulnerability and sharing everything with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really, really appreciate everything that you've shared. And I also want to make sure to mention that you will be joining Courtney with the conference this spring. And we'd love for you to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I will be talking about sexual communication, disclosure. How do we disclose all of the things, not just our STI disclosure? So I'll be talking about the STARS talk and how this framework could help us navigate our disclosure, and not make our STI status the central and primary reason we are disclosing, so that it just becomes one of many parts of who we are.
Yeah.
So I'll be talking about that.
I love it. Well, links to sign up for the conference will be in the show notes. Links to your STARS talk, your TED talk, will be in the show notes as well. Is there any other work that people should be out there looking for? Obviously, your book's not quite ready yet, but when it is, you can bet your ass you'll be back here. So we'll be there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Is there any other work?
Well, I do have, I have, on the website, maketimeforthetalk.com. I do have a free downloadable workbook. It's a PDF. It's, so that you could go through your STARS talk. It's before safety came first. It will definitely need to be updated. It'll probably be changed after my book is released. So you have probably another year of getting this free, very long workbook that you can use. And I have I have an STI handbook there that's available for purchase. It has all the information about different STIs, including herpes and how to disclose herpes, and HPV and all of that. And, I'll be doing some workshops on STARS at different venues. If you sign up at Make Time for the Talk for my newsletter, for my email, you'll get links to all of the podcasts and everything else that I do.
Perfect.
This will probably be included on one of those email newsletters.
Yay, wonderful.
Yeah, well, definitely links will be in the show notes for that. And just, again, thank you, Dr. Dacker, for all your work, for the work you do, the work you put out into the world and changing lives. And is there anything that we haven't asked about or talked about that you want to scream out into the universe today while you've got the microphone?
Just, that it's okay to be you. Whoever you are, whatever you show up, whatever color hair or whatever, just be you. And it's a scary world right now to kind of show up in those ways, but that's how we're going to change it. That's how we're going to raise the consciousness of humanity, by just being okay and loving each other.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. This was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed having this conversation and being given the opportunity to share my story.
Yeah. You're welcome.
It was a true delight and our honor. So thank you.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a beautifully said last sentence or two as well. And just that point of be yourself and it's okay. I love ending there. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
And we are back. Thank you again, Dr. Dacker, for everything. We really, really loved talking to you and just really appreciated you sharing everything that you did. A quick reminder that you can find links to all of Dr. Dacker's websites and all of the resources that she mentioned in this episode in your podcast show notes, in your podcast player, or on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com.
Yeah. Again, Dr. Dacker, thank you for coming on, for all the work you do, and super excited to get your next episode out there when your book comes out.
Yes.
Pretty pumped for that. So
super excited.
Until then,
a quick reminder
about
our virtual meet and greet on April 11th. That is next week. You can sign up at our website using the banner page at the top.
You can, or you can go to the events tab. The other things that we would remind you to do, please go sign up for the Herpes Stigma Conference. Support Something Positive for Positive People, an amazing organization, an amazing nonprofit.
Yes.
Courtney is an amazing human, and all of the people he's got on the lineup for the conference are incredible. So please go check out that work, sign up for that, get yourself some education.
And with that, next week we have an interview with Mike and Mara. It is beautiful, so come back and listen then.
And I suppose we'll see you all in a week.
I think that's all.
That's all.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.